Okay, imagine this. You wake up, stretch, go to brush your teeth, and someone who looks exactly like you is already using your toothbrush.
Creepy? Yeah, but also kind of iconic. Welcome to the strange, mind bending world of cloning.
We're four friends with one big question. Should humans even be cloned?
And to figure that out, we're digging into science, ethics, and all the what if chaos in between.
I'm Geneve.
I'm Harmony.
I'm Bailey.
And I'm Margarita, and this is
Copy Paste.
So picture this. It's the late 1800s. A German biologist, Hans Adolf Edward Driesch. Sounds like a guy with a creepy jar collection, right?
Definitely had a monocle. Probably had a pet frog named Professor Slime. But he does something wild. Separates a sea urchin embryo, and each half grows into a full sea urchin. Boom, the first known clone.
Simple, eerie, but kind of genius. Fast forward 100 years and the world gets rocked by a sheep.
Not just any sheep, the Beyonce of sheep, Dolly, created by Ian Wilmot and Keith Campbell using something called a somatic cell nuclear transfer.
Basically, take the nucleus of an adult body cell, put it into an empty egg cell, zap it, and boom, Dolly.
She was the first mammal cloned from an adult cell. Groundbreaking, terrifying, and short-lived. She died at 6 from a lung tumor.
And with her death came the big question, should we even be doing this?
To answer that, we need to understand what cloning really is. Let's get nerdy.
DNA, the OG blueprint of life, written in A, T, C, and G.
Cloning starts with that. Scientists cut out a gene with restriction enzymes, tiny molecular scissors.
They stick that gene into a plasmid, circular DNA that acts like a delivery van, using DNA ligase, aka molecular glue.
That plasma gets entered into a host cell, and bam, transformation. The cell now follows a new genetic instruction.
The gene gets transcribed into RNA, then translated into protein. Central dogma, baby, DNA, RNA, protein.
Promoters and enhancers guide the process, like a film director yelling, "Action!"
And to make sure it's working, scientists add antibiotic resistance markers to spot the transformed cells.
Expression cloning even creates entire libraries of protein-producing clones, huge for medicine and research.
So yeah, DNA cloning is powerful, but when we leap from cells to people, things get messy.
So let's say we actually clone a human. Not sci-fi, not some villain in a lab. We're talking real, full on, another you. Sounds cool in theory, but what could go wrong?
Short answer, mutations. Long answer, way too much. Cloning isn't just a clean process. It involves copying DNA, and errors may happen, like a lot of them. These mutations often show up in specific genome regions, and that can lead to serious health issues like clonal hematopoiesis.
Which basically means mutated blood cells start multiplying in your bone marrow. It's associated with cancers like leukemia, and it doesn't just affect humans. Even cloned animals show increased rates of tumors, deformities, and shortened lifespans.
Dolly the sheep, remember her? The OG mammal clone? She died young from a lung tumor and arthritis. Not exactly a glowing review of the process. And get this, the success rate for animal cloning is still super low, like less than 10%.
So now imagine trying to apply that to humans. Failed clones, developmental issues, just ethical disasters waiting to happen.
Still, cloning isn't just a horror movie. There's therapeutic cloning, for example, where the goal isn't to make a person but to grow tissues or organs that are genetically identical to a patient.
That could mean regenerating a damaged heart, repairing spinal cord injuries, or even replacing neurons in degenerative diseases like Parkinson's.
It could also help people with inherited diseases like Huntington's or cystic fibrosis by offering genetic repairs or even custom-grown organ transplants with no risk of rejection.
And for couples who can't have children, reproductive cloning could be a way to have a genetically related child. That's deeply personal and controversial.
Some people might want to clone a deceased loved one, thinking it could bring comfort, but emotionally, it gets messy. Like, are you trying to heal, or are you trying to replace someone you lost?
That's the heart of the ethical debate. Identity, autonomy, and grief are all tangled in the conversation.
Plus, let's not ignore the public health risks. If you clone people with the same genetic makeup, you reduce immune system diversity, so one virus could wipe out thousands.
It's like putting all your eggs in the same DNA basket. And if a disease adapts to one person, it could easily spread to everyone with that same immune blueprint.
And here's where it gets scary: misuse. Imagine a dictator cloning an army of so-called perfect soldiers, or a billionaire cloning themselves over and over to maintain power and influence.
We've seen it in books and films, but it's not that far-fetched. Technology tends to outpace legislation.
And that brings us to genetic engineering. Since the 70s, scientists have genetically modified everything from bacteria to cows. So you're probably eating GMOs today, like corn, soy, or even salmon.
But modifying humans, that's a new ethical level. Recombinant DNA, where DNA from multiple sources is combined to create new traits, has already been used in gene therapy.
Designer babies used to be fiction. Now, with gene editing, it's technically possible. You could select for traits like eye color, height, maybe even intelligence.
But would that lead to a society where only the wealthy can afford perfect children? What happens to people who aren't enhanced?
We'd need everyone to understand epigenetics, the study of how environment affects gene expression. Genes are in destiny. Take, for example, Himalayan rabbits. Cold parts of their body grow black fur, while warm parts stay white. Same DNA, but different outcomes.
So even if two people are genetically identical, like clones, they might turn out completely different depending on where and how they're raised.
Nature and nurture, always hand in hand. And that's important when people assume a clone would be just like the original.
But let's come back to reality. In today's world, we're still asking the big questions. Should we clone humans at all? Who gets cloned? And who decides?
Can a baby consent to being cloned, or is that choice entirely in someone else's hands? That opens a whole new conversation about autonomy.
If you're a clone, are you a copy? A person? Property? It sounds dramatic, but courts would have to decide that. It's all up in the air right now. To get a deeper perspective, we interviewed a bioethicist and professor at UNC Chapel Hill. She spent over 15 years studying the intersection of science and ethics, especially in genetic technologies.
She said one of her biggest concerns is eugenics. The idea of selecting traits to build ideal humans is not new. History already tried it, and it led to horrible consequences.
In the early 1900s, eugenic programs led to forced sterilizations, and worse, in the name of purity and improvement. We cannot afford to repeat that with genetic editing or cloning.
She said if we open the door to cloning, we need airtight systems of accountability, not just rules, but enforceable global regulations. Otherwise, she warned, the science will outpace morality.
Dr. Vargas talked about the idea of relational identity, that a clone sense of self would always be tied to someone else, their origin, their creator, their original. And that kind of psychological pressure could be damaging.
Think about growing up and being told you were made to replace someone else. That's a heavy burden to carry, and it questions where that person's agency begins.
That's why we advocate for ethical review boards before any human cloning trials, clear consent laws, especially regarding minors or embryos, long-term health monitoring across decades, not just a few years, a ban on cloning for profit or celebrity purposes, and finally, global cooperation to prevent black market labs from exploiting loopholes.
And she made it clear, cloning should never be done casually. The stakes are too high. One mistake and boom, it could ruin a life or many.
So what do we do now?
Well, we pause, we educate, we keep these conversations going, not just in science lab, but in schools, in communities, in government.
Because cloning isn't just a technical issue, it's a human one. And it demands more than scientific knowledge. It demands wisdom.
Cloning could heal or harm. It all depends on how we use it and who we let it control it.
Cloning started with a sea urchin and ended with us questioning what it means to be human.
From DNA to designer babies, the science is real, and so are the consequences.
Whether we use it to save lives or play God, cloning isn't fiction anymore.
So next time you look in the mirror, ask if someone made another you, who would they really be?
And more importantly, who gets to decide?